And now, the general weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Monday, the first day of September 2025. And we're going to start out as we go through Tuesday. We have an area of low pressure with a rather potent shortwave moving in the early morning along the lower Yukon coast and this wider expanse of Norton Sound. It's going to have some gusty winds. There is a high surf advisory in effect this Monday afternoon through Tuesday morning, and water levels could be a couple of feet higher than normal with these gusty south and then southwest winds pulling through with that feature. Low pressure will then swing across the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula Tuesday afternoon as yet another low down in the North Pacific begins to head northeastward toward Bristol Bay, and that low will be crossing the Alaska Peninsula Tuesday evening into Tuesday night and then up toward Bristol Bay before racing off to the north and east. So ahead of these systems, we find IFR conditions along the western Gulf, west arm of the Alaska Range up there toward Windy Pass. Also areas along and south of the spine of the Brooks Range in IFR conditions. And then back out along especially central western Aleutians, we have IFR conditions. But into Tuesday afternoon, it's going to be a very warm and dry day across the Panhandle. Heat advisories, both northern and southern parts of the Panhandle, where temperatures could reach the mid-70s to lower 80s. Meanwhile, we have the IFR conditions over the Gulf, maybe nudging toward Kayak Island and Cordova, extending along the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula and then back out toward the Aleutians. The moisture that comes inland with that dissipating low in front, MVFR, into the middle Yukon Valley up along the south slopes of the Brooks Range, including the Koyukuk Valley. So that moisture will continue eastward. Wednesday morning, we find IFR conditions again along the spine and south of the Brooks Range up there in the northwest interior, and then along the central and lower Gulf back to the east side of Kodiak Island and along the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. IFR conditions are expected Wednesday because, again, that low pressure will be tracking quickly northeastward through that region with some rain and breezy conditions. And then for Wednesday afternoon, we find still IFR conditions hugging along the Kenai Peninsula coastline in eastern Kodiak Island toward Chiknik. And then we also have extensive MVFR conditions out over the southwest interior, Alaska Range in the south and eastward facing slopes, as well as up along the Brooks Range. Looking at pass conditions then, on Tuesday, Anatuvik Pass will see IFR conditions become MVFR. Same thing there, Adigan in the east central Brooks Range. IFR conditions to start there, especially the earlier mid-morning, giving way to MVFR. And then Lake Clark and Merrill will start out with IFR conditions becoming VFR as we go through Tuesday afternoon into evening as a result of a frontal passage trying to clear things out a little bit. Rainy Pass IFR also becoming MVFR, and that'll be the same case up there at Windy Pass IFR becoming MVFR. Isabel Pass should generally remain MVFR during the day Tuesday, and further east where you're still getting the influence of that mid-upper level ridge of high pressure, warmer temperatures out there toward the upper Tanana Valley and far northeastern part of the Copper River Basin. Sunshine, some places in the valleys there could be at or above 70 with VFR conditions. And then Tanita Pass, kind of in between VFR, MVFR. And then down toward Portage Pass, generally MVFR conditions, though some IFR conditions could come up from Prince William Sound as we go through the day. And then in the northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White will see VFR conditions on Tuesday, again with some sunshine and warm temperatures. Look at the freezing levels aloft. Starting in Tuesday morning, you can clearly see the influence of that mid-upper level ridge of high pressure. Freezing levels aloft are around 16,000 feet, especially over the central Panhandle, so that's going to facilitate that compressional warming, sinking motion, and very warm temperatures. Back to the west, here's the cooler pocket of air aloft, freezing levels down to and just below 4,000 feet over St. Lawrence Island toward Nome. This is where that low pressure just quickly is moving northeastward and weakening, and it's going to push those gustier winds inland as they impact areas of the lower Yukon coast, especially later tonight and on Tuesday morning. And that's why that high surf advisory is in effect. But the warmest air is being pushed off toward the east out over the Gulf and into northwest Canada. And looking at where we have some precipitation, we could find moderate icing up along the Chukchi Sea coast, Utqiagvik toward the Lisburn Peninsula, as well as pockets coming down along Norton Sound and off the lower Yukon, but more so with this next surge of moisture coming northeastward above 10, 12, and 14,000 feet, because this is deep moisture and the freezing levels increase as you head south and southeastward. And clearly on the jet stream map at 30,000 feet, we have a 150-knot jet core out over the central and east central interior. And you can clearly see the ridging pattern here out over the Gulf, back toward the Panhandle, and then troughiness back here toward especially the northern Bering. As we drop down to 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, we have one low circulation up here near the Bering Strait, another one coming up out of the North Pacific toward the far eastern Aleutians and the lower Alaska Peninsula, but a broad belt of stronger winds around 40, 45 knots from Shelikof Strait down across the Alaska Peninsula, and then another broad area of winds 30 to 40 knots across much of the mainland interior. And at 3,000 feet, we do find some winds just off of the Panhandle coastline and northeast Gulf Coast, upwards of 30, 35 knots. And then we have this belt of winds around that low circulation of 30 to 50 knots as you get closer to the low center. And then as we look out toward the mainland, coming in with that low on Tuesday, there are winds 30, 40 knots pushing across the lower Yukon and Norton Sound and then working its way east-northeastward. And we also have some pretty good winds along the north slope there and Beaufort Sea coast, anywhere from 30 to 40 knots. So the greatest threat for turbulence on Tuesday is going to be in a few different spots. It's going to be here coming into from the lower Yukon in through Norton Sound and pushing into the western interior, surface to 4,000 feet. There also could be some low-level wind shear with that front. As that front extends further south, there could be some low-level wind shear near especially lower Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, and Kodiak Island, surface to 6,000 feet. And then some turbulence, moderate turbulence across the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula, especially False Pass, that area northward, surface to 4,000 feet.